Happy Sunday, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Untold Story, Male Trauma and Surviving Sexual Abuse in the Shadow of October 7th. I'm Dr. Tracey Stulberg. I'm the director of the Birmingham Family Therapy Clinic and our nonprofit, the Michigan Restorative Justice Project. I've worked with trauma survivors, offenders, and family members for over 35 years. So those that are working through sexual abuse, physical violence, human trafficking, severe neglect, violent death, psychological maltreatment, homelessness. I am also and very honored to be a board member of the American Friends of ELEM. ELEM was established in 1982 and is Israel's leading nonprofit organization dedicated to treating and transforming the lives of youth at risk through formal and informal interventions. ELEM supports over 13,000 young people aged 6 to 26 of all backgrounds, races, religions, nationalities each year who deal with tremendous challenges such as physical violence, substance abuse, severe neglect, psychological maltreatment, bullying, homelessness, human trafficking, and sexual abuse. ELEM's thousands of professionals and volunteers actively reach youth where they are, assisting them in paving the way towards reintegration into their larger communities and families. January is National Human Trafficking Awareness Month. And so we're talking about ELEM's work with survivors of sex trafficking, exploitation, and sexual abuse as part of our Survivors Hope campaign. You can learn more about this campaign and this project on our website at elem.org/survivors-hope. Joining us, and thank you, y'all, from Israel is Ori Sherman, the director of ELEM's Orshina Center, which is the only center in Israel dedicated to supporting teen boys who have survived sexual abuse. Ori holds a master's degree in social work with a specialization in treating male survivors of complex sexual trauma. He brings 12 years of experience in the field of sexual trauma treatment. And before joining Orshina as its first director, Ori worked at Israel's Rape Crisis Center as the manager of a hotline for religious men. Ori's comprehensive approach reflects his commitment to both individual healing and broader social change. Joining him in conversation is Rabbi Daniel Brenner, Vice President of Education for Moving Traditions. Since 2011, Rabbi Brenner has trained over 300 men to lead Shevet, Moving Traditions mentorship program for Jewish teen boys, and has helped synagogues, day schools, and summer camps to better serve the needs of teenage boys. Ori, Rabbi Brenner, thank you for joining us today. As we begin, I'd like to lay the foundation to talk about sexual abuse, sexual exploitation, and human trafficking. I know that the definition of human trafficking can sometimes be confusing, so I'm going to try to make it as simple as possible. In order for a crime to be human trafficking, 3 things must exist: the act, what's done, the means, how it is done, and the purpose, why it's done. So the act is an inducement or recruitment or harboring or transportation or providing or obtaining, which is what a trafficker does. The means is how it's done, and a trafficker uses force, fraud, coercion, deception, abuse of power in order for the purpose of commercial sex trade, forced labor, slavery, servitude. And those 3 things together complete the crime of sex trafficking, unless there is a minor. If you are a minor, you cannot consent, anybody under the age of 18. So the means, force, fraud, or coercion, is unnecessary because you can't consent. So with that, let's talk a little bit about numbers. Today, globally, 49.6 million people are thought to be in modern slavery worldwide, and 12 million of them are children. Forced commercial sexual exploitation, human trafficking, generates about $173 billion in illegal profits annually. Studies have shown that a large amount of our survivors have experienced adverse childhood experiences, such as sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional, psychological abuse, neglect, homelessness, and foster care. And traffickers understand these vulnerabilities in these youth and young adults, and they use them in order to compel them into the trade. It's one of the reasons that child abuse has been discussed as and identified as a leading risk factor in sex trafficking, because these are the things that happen to these children and young adults before traffickers get a hold of them. In the United States, it's estimated that 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be sexually abused before the age of 18, usually by someone they know. And some of the more current studies have estimated upwards of 75% of these children that are trafficked by a parent, a sibling, or a close relative, usually with whom they live. With those factors in mind, Ori, can you tell us a little bit about the trafficking situation in Israel?
So, good morning, everyone. And I'm really happy to be here, even though this subject is not easy to talk about. We have also in Israel a big problem of sexual trafficking. We know that the number talked about like 4,000 minors in a year who've been trafficked. And we know that there is a big connection, as Tracey said, between people who were sexually abused in their childhood and being trafficked afterward. So we know that also the numbers doesn't represent truly the situation, because there is a lot of things that happen under the eyes of the researchers. So we see that there is also a kind of like black spot, like a dead spot about boys who is in the situation of trafficking, because most of them doesn't talk about their trauma and about their sexual situation. A lot of times they even doesn't consider the situation that they are in it as sexual trauma or trafficking. A lot of times they grow up thinking this is the way the world is working, like this is the way they've been educated and this is how the world works, so they won't call themselves like sex worker or something like this. So it's very complicated to know how many people in Israel, how many boys are in the situation of trafficking.
Tracey, I want to just thank you for starting us off and giving us more of a global perspective. We are dealing with criminal syndicates that work across borders to exploit young people and sometimes to exploit children. And in this way, I think it's important to recognize Israel is both like many other countries, or like all other countries that have to deal with this global syndicate of criminal activity, and also has some unique there's some unique dynamics that are happening in Israel. And those are the things that we really wanted to learn about today from Ori. So Ori, we are going to be talking a lot about things that are hard to talk about. But before we get to that, I'd just love to hear a little bit about your journey before you started to become a social worker and work in a rape crisis center. I'd love to just hear a little bit about where you grew up, what kind of schools you went to, what kind of family you came from, because I think every Israeli story is a different slice of Israel. I'd love to hear about what part of that world you come from.
So I grew up in a religious village. My family is Datim Leumim, like national Zionist.
Yes.
My father is a rabbi, and all the religious in my house was very big thing also practically and also emotionally. And I grew up in a very strict like religious view. I go to yeshivot from young age, like age of 13. I go to yeshivot, like yeshiva ktana, little yeshiva, and
So
then
you're living with other boys in a dormitory
yeah,
situation. Yes,
totally.
yes.
And I think that when I was a teenager, this is when I started to think about the situation of sexuality in our society. I wasn't aware of the problematic situation. I feeling like a lot of complicated feelings uh, about meeting sexuality, a lot of shame, a lot of guilt. Like I feel like that I having a sexual feeling, it's a sin. It's not a good thing. It's something that I shouldn't feel, shouldn't have felt. And also when I grow up and talk with my friend, I encounter a lot of problem regarding the situation. Like I have a lot of friends who were in the process of going out as a gay person, and I encounter a lot of problematic situation with the parents. Some of my friends lost the connection with their parents because they have to choose their sexuality or their community or their families.
Mm.
And
Ori, I remember growing up, I had a Chabad rabbi tell me about the gartel, the belt that you wear
yeah,
for prayer. And he basically said to me, everything below your belt is a beast, is an animal.
that,
It's dirty.
that,
Everything is dirty. So, in order to purify yourself, you have to disconnect yourself from your sexuality in order to elevate your soul. And I
yeah,
remember that message being like, it made me feel shamed about having any kind of
yeah.
attraction to anybody, or like did you have a similar kind of?
Yeah, totally. I felt like something bad in me because I thinking about those things. Like I shouldn't think about it, and I do a lot of like ceremonies. Like I go to the mikveh, and I always trying to cure myself from this very like imminent feeling. And today I know to tell myself and my children that it's a beautiful thing. Like if you feeling it, it's great. It means that you are healthy, that you are you have like you're feeling good.
Yes,
It's
but
and
but I think, yeah.
but when I grow up, yeah, I feel a lot of guilt and shame, and I always try to fight it. Like don't think about it because we have this saying in Hebrew, "Hirurei avera kashim me'avera," which means if you're thinking about this stuff, it's worse than doing it. Like so
Right.
you even not allowed to think about it. So it's very hard. It was very
And I know I was in Israel during Purim, and I saw the breast lovers are passing out the tikkun,
yeah
the way
yeah.
to fix your sexual problem. And
This is the
so,
text. Nobody talked with me about it. My father never talked with me
but
about
they
it.
say these particular psalms, and
Yeah,
then you'll cure
there
yourself.
is a lot of like warning. Like if you do it, you ruin the world. There will be Mabul. There will
A
be
flood, yeah, a
a
destruction.
flood. There will
Okay.
be earthquake. There will be like all the
So there's a lot of just fear around any thought
yeah.
about sexuality. So that's another piece that makes it even more challenging to talk about
This is
sexuality.
the thing that drove me. I wanted to make change in this area, but I didn't know about social work, about
Okay, but you're a Shiva boy and teenager. What
yeah,
would you know
yeah,
about it? But
yeah,
you
exactly.
had friends who were coming out. You started to raise questions in your own mind
Yeah.
about what is this? What are we being taught? And what is a healthy way to be? And eventually you found your way into social work. Do you remember the first time in either school or in your work experience when you felt, wow, this is something bigger that maybe I should be focusing my career and profession on?
You ask about sexual trauma,
Yeah,
about
about sexual harm, trauma,
okay.
just about all
So,
of the things that
so when
that
I
you
was
started to.
studying my bachelor degree, my first degree, I didn't know a lot about sexual harm or sexual trauma, and I going to work in the field of mental illness and rehabilitation and all this area. And when I was going to study master degree, there was like a scholarship, which you have to do like a project and to volunteer in the community. And as I told you about my gay friends, one of them tell me, we need like someone who will be in charge of the volunteers and do like community work. And I said to him, it sounds great. But after a couple of weeks, he told me, we found someone from the community who will do it. So I'm sorry, but you
It's not
find
you.
something
Okay.
else. And then I look in the list of the scholarship, and I
Yes.
saw this rape crisis center that you can volunteer in the scholarship over there. And when I see it, I ask the person who was in charge, can I volunteer there? Because right then, 12 years before, I thinking that rape crisis center is for women by women. I thought that men doesn't have place in this
Right.
organization.
Right.
So I asked her, this is where I was 12 years ago. And then she said to me, yes, you can do it. It's educational work, and we need a man who will be role model to the young boys. And so I joined it, and I didn't know a lot about trauma, and it was life-changing because I did the course that you have to learn in order to volunteer. And I remember sitting in the room. I was the only man. All the rest of the volunteers were women, and I heard their experience, and it's like it shocked me. It's like it changed my role. Like I remember one of the meeting, one of the volunteers, she said, when I walk in Jerusalem, I walk with keys in my between the fingers. I take the key, and I didn't understand why are you doing it, and I see all the other women participants like nodding their heads, and then she said, because I'm afraid of someone will try to attack me, so it's like in this moment I felt like I'm living in the same street, we're living in the same city, but I'm not living in the same street. I'm not living in the same city. Like the way that I am experiencing street is so different from the way she is experiencing the street. And right then I understand how trauma and sexual trauma, and it's so complicated and so.
I don't want to generalize, but I know what you're saying, because I feel like it's a very common story for men to say, I had no idea what women go through just being in the world. And then at a certain point, usually when you're a young adult, you start to hear a story from a woman who lives with this fear because she's living with the trauma in the background of her life, and it's always present. And it just changes your sense of what is it to be moving through this world. And that's an experience of empathy, an experience which I guess for you initially thought, what could be my place here in this rape crisis center? But eventually, I'm sure were in conversation with men who live with that fear.
And then I started to going inside the classes to work with the youth, with the adolescents in the schools. And I was surprised because I was frightened that I go inside the class and it will be very hard to talk with them. I was thinking that maybe they see me as like someone from outside, but I see that in the minute that I get inside the class and talk with them eye to eye, and being humble and listen to them, they started to talk, they started to ask, they started to engage in conversation, and it was overwhelming feeling. Like I felt this is so important. This is the thing that I want to do for the rest of my career, professional.
Incredible. So
This,
let me just throw out just the way that I've seen masculinity play out, at least in the American context, American Jewish context. In the American context, a man is supposed to be physically aggressive. In the Jewish context, I would say you have to add intellectual
yeah,
aggression.
yeah.
But there's a certain kind of aggression that a man is supposed to have. A man is supposed to be not feminine in any way, so not weak, not soft, not empathetic. A man is supposed to command respect from friends. And all of those things are ways in which men are really, really in a tricky place when they're suffering in any way, when they're struggling with mental health in any way, struggling with grief or loss in any way, or struggling with a traumatic experience like sexual harm. What were your feelings about being in an Israeli school, talking with Israeli boys about what was their masculinity like, and what did you have to say to help them understand like that men need support from others and need, places where they can talk about the deep hurt that they've experienced?
So I can talk about also the boys in the school, but also the boys in the street, because right now I see them also in the street, and it's amazing to see a lot of similar reaction when I go into the class or when someone come into our space in the street. Most of them will start with joking, like they say
Yeah.
like some unappropriated joke about like when they approached our space, they said, "Oh, you are working with a rape victim. Okay, this my friend need you. He's need you," and all kind of things like, and it's not, but they trying to engage, but the basic defense
It's a
mechanism,
distancing from it.
the basic,
Humor to
yeah,
distance. Yeah.
yeah, but they come and they engage us. They want to talk, and also in the class. So there is you have to go through this wall. You have to be you. If you be too much educational in the situation, you will lose them. If you try to educate them in these minutes, they go and they understand that they can talk with you. But if you be a little bit to encompass the situation, to let them talk, and then even sometimes be tell something funny from my side, which is more appropriate, then they will see that you are not afraid. You are not trying to to educate them, and you're trying to listen to them. And after you're going through this phase, like if it's one time encounter, so it will be several minutes, and then we'll go to the questions that start to raise up and rise up. There is a lot of questions. They ask a lot. They ask about the very basic things, like what is considered as sexuality,
Sure.
is situation. So if you pass these barriers, you be able to do a lot. But
Yeah,
it's
I,
not.
I always have to say that one of the things that I try to teach about working with boys in general is that they use humor to test any adult to
Yeah,
see if that adult really is going to listen or if that adult is going to shut them down. And
and
they
judge.
feel like if I can use my humor and I can be my total self, I can remain a little bit distant from whatever this conversation is going to be to protect myself.
Yeah.
And like I think what you're speaking of is really connected to that. Um, I know that in the United States, we've had after Me Too, we had a couple of prominent men, most notably Terry Crews, a former NFL football star and now comedy actor. He spoke about his experience of being sexually harmed, sexually assaulted, being the victim. It was very helpful for men. What is it like in the Israeli context? Are there men who are speaking out in the same way? Is there, do you think, more shame around speaking out because it is a more macho culture. It's a more military focused culture out of necessity. But do you feel like it's changing in Israel? What's your sense?
First of all, Cherry is amazing, and I love him as an actor
Yeah.
and also as a role model. And I think it's beautiful to see someone like Terry talk about his trauma and like being a role model. Here in Israel, we don't have someone so high profile who socially who talked about his trauma. There is more like high profile offenders, which also when we talk about sexual trauma in men, most of the time the most people think about the predator and the offender, and
Yes.
it's very hard to see the men as victims. And I will say that, yeah, in Israel, I think that we are like a couple of years behind you in the conversation about sexual trauma of men. And I think there is a lot of cultural things that play here. I can say that I think there is no equivalent word for the word gever. Like gever, it's not the same as man. I know there is like man up and also like this, but it's for us in Israel, it's starting from the very early beginning. Like even when a child is just birth, it just come to the world, their parent hold him and they like can say compliment that nobody will say to a baby girl, like as a giver. Like
And
it's
Gever is related to Gevura, like
yeah, like
you have
to
courage and bravery
yeah,
and all
yeah.
of these
And
things.
it's only these tiny things which is only come to the world, but they tell these things for two purposes. First, for the environment, for the people around, that they make no mistake. It's a boy, it's a man, and also for him to know this is your role. Like we are a society that we have all of us, all the parents, we have in our subconscious, we have the notion that one day this little boy will need to be a combat soldier, even if he won't be, he maybe needs to be. So we are raising our boys, we have to toughen them, we have to make them tough enough to survive the situation. And we talk about the ability to feel in that you lost someone. And I always give this example. If you go inside a high school in Israel and you see two girls, you see a girl that put her head in the table and cry. And you ask her, why are you crying? What happened? And she said to you, I'm lost. I had a fight with my best friend and I lost her. We won't be friends again.
Right.
It would be reasonable that she's crying for it because she experienced a big loss. But if you see a teenager boy and he will do the same, he will cry in his table, and you ask him, why are you crying? And he will say to you, I fight with my best friend and I lost him and we won't be in any connection anymore. When I tell this story to some law officer here who work with people who've been through trauma, one of them said to me, what are you saying? I will give him like a slap to make him straight, like that he won't be confused.
Stop
It
being so emotional,
it
be
was so
rational. Right.
it was so uneasy for him to hear that he felt like I need to get him straight, like literally.
Yeah.
So we see that we felt this need to raise them like this. If a boy cry in a young age, a lot of time he will hear this question, what are you, girl? What are you, a pussy? What you are? So a lot of
There was a lot of
naughty
negativity.
words.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
which is, one of the things that I heard from a friend of mine, Richard Stern, who's a psychologist, is that tears are the emotional reset button for the human. And when you take tears away from men, what you're doing is you're taking away their ability to self-heal. And what happens instead is whatever is inside just starts to eat away and turns into anger, aggression, despondency, all these other things that happen. And so I do feel like you're describing a process that I'm very familiar with. And it may be even more intense in Israel, where what you're saying is people, if you're saying this 2-year-old boy is going to be a combat soldier, let's let him cry this one out. Let him toughen himself up. Now that kind of thinking really can rob a boy of the
Even
full
even
range of emotion.
even going to a medical doctor, we see in researchers of medical centers that more women go to a family doctor,
Yes,
and always, even when the men go to the doctor, most of the time his wife take him,
somebody said go to the doctor. It
and
was not
sometimes
you.
he take him to the doctor.
Right, right.
So even talking about my physical pain, it's hard because
Any kind of weakness.
I have to
Yes,
be always strong. I have to know what I'm doing. I have to be very precisely, very to be.
yes. No, that's very, very intense what you're describing. So I want to take us to um, the last couple of years in Israel. And I know that immediately after October 7th, when we first saw these images that, I mean, I know that people were seeing them on Telegram and everything in the hours that they were happening, there was just horror because you were seeing mainly young women who were being taken and kidnapped and abused, and you could see it. And immediately there were reports of sexual assault that came out. And it was just horrifying. And it has been, and we've all been thinking about the hostages. We've all been thinking about the terror. And I remember hearing that in the first wave of hostages that came back, there were people who were talking about surviving sexual assault, and even there was someone who came back and who was pregnant and had to deal with that. But I did not hear, and I follow the Israeli news very closely. I read the news almost every day. I did not hear about men who had survived sexual assault. Obviously, men survived many other types of harm, but I know that there is a story. And could you share with us a little bit about what people have heard and what people have learned from that experience?
I think that October 7 what did started a lot of very complicated process that we are dealing with in Israel in a lot of ways. And for men who cope with sexual trauma, it's very complicated situation. First of all, we doesn't hear about sexual abuse of men, but we know from evidence of the people who treat the bodies who were there that they can see a lot of physical evidence of men who was sexually abused, who doesn't survive. And we know that some of the people who were abused survived, but they doesn't talk about it. So a lot of months, nobody talked about it. I always look at in the news, like there was like 2 lines. Also, Za'akah, it's the organization who treat the bodies. Also, Za'akah volunteers found this evidence, but nobody talks about it. And until only one victim till now talked about it. He talked a little about his experience. Also, he was doing it incognito, only the first letter of the name, Daled, was, and we can see how much he felt fear from being exposed. Like he doesn't want people to know that he's been through sexual trauma, but he wants people to know there was men who've been through sexual trauma.
So this anonymous person, Israeli man, Daled, was Daled on radio or television, like talking about the story?
Yeah.
How did people hear about it?
Yeah, it was in the television and also in the radio, and it was short interviews. He tell a little bit about his story, and mostly said how it's hard for him to function after it and how emotionally are we feeling a big breakdown, and that he can't talk about it a lot, and he doesn't hear anyone who talked about it. And we know that I know from the boys and the men that I work with how complicated it's right now, because it's very confusing. Like the conversation about trauma in Israel right now is like being very increasing. Like everybody talks about trauma. We know that everyone experienced some kind of secondary trauma or first hand trauma, and and uh, לכאורה, like how would I say, like you supposed to think that okay, we got advanced, but what we see about men who cope with sexual trauma is like they feeling everybody talks about the trauma, but men talk only about combat trauma, about post-trauma in the battlefield.
Sure.
Like, and when they are talking about their trauma, they are feeling like there is no place for this kind of trauma for men. Because right now we have to man up, we have to be fighters. We can't talk about trauma which is not related to the war. And they feeling like they have to repress their story. Nobody has like the airtime to talk about this kind of trauma. So in the one hand, everybody talks about trauma, but in the other hand, nobody wants to hear about this kind of trauma. So
Yeah.
it's very
Well, you have, you know, what you have in a wider culture is the same thing you have in a family system. Sometimes in a family system, one person's trauma doesn't make space for everybody else's trauma. And sometimes in a culture, one group's trauma doesn't make space for anyone else's trauma. And this dynamic, you know, we call it the trauma Olympics. Like, you know, everybody needs to find, yeah, no, I need my attention for my trauma. That dynamic itself is harmful, because obviously there are so many different layers of harm that people experience, and especially, you know, the harder it is to talk about the harm, the more help you probably need, the more support you probably need, to you know, heal from it and move forward. So I want to shift gears for a second. And I know that your work with Orshina has taken on many different forms. Um, you have very clear ideas about how you want to support victims. You have very clear ideas about how you want to increase the amount of discourse that happens around the harm that men experience, particularly the sexual harm they experience. But I know that you tried many different methods to reach men, to reach teen boys, and to reach men. So I'd love to hear a little bit first about some of the experiences you've done in group context. I happen to be most familiar with group context. One of the things that I've been doing, as was mentioned before, is training men who can mentor groups of teen boys. And it is just helpful for boys to both laugh about everything together, but also to hear diverse experiences from other boys and feel like I'm not alone in thinking and having these questions in my head. There are places within the Jewish community where we can talk about things that are going on with our lives, including talk about sex and sexuality and sexual harm and all of those things. Sexual objectification, another thing that we talk about, is about men's responsibility towards other humans. Consent is a big topic that we talk about. Personal boundaries, communication, desire, all of those things are things that we talk about within the group context and train people to do it in a healthy and supportive way. So I'd love to hear just your experiences in the group context, leading groups of either teen boys or groups of men. What are some of the positives? What are some of the negatives? What have you tried? What has worked? And where do where do you find like, okay, this we could try to do better?
Okay, first of all, I want to say that I have another thoughts about the way the men express their trauma right now, and I want to
Oh, please share that thought. I don't want to lose it. I'll get back to my question.
I will continue after it about what you asked,
Okay,
but
got you.
I just want to say that like right now, something that I see a lot that like the framework of their thoughts is the war. So a lot of time, what they're talking about, like right now, I need to volunteer to the army. I need to get recruited, some of them can't be recruited because of the mental situation. They can't serve in combat situation, but they're saying like the way I make my life meaningful, that if I fail in the battle. So all the guilt and the shame and all the hard feeling about the trauma, the self-harm feeling are articulate to going to war. Like this is the way I fulfill my purpose in life. One of them told to me, I will earn kiseh shel kavod in the sky. Like I earn the chair of
Honor.
honor
Yes,
in the
yes.
sky. So it's one thought that I want to say. So it's very hard. And about your question about working with them, with the boys. So I want to say how it's all started. Like why we need Orshina at all. So
Yes.
we in ELEM work a lot of years with victim of sexual trauma, like about, I think maybe 30 years. And we have like some more conservative therapy centers, which minors until the age of 18 come to get therapy. And I
For
work in
one-on-one appointment, like a
one-on-one appointment once in a week, sometimes with the parent, sometimes it's family therapy, but it's always like a clinical, classical therapy. And I work in those centers for 5 years. And I noticed that for me as a male therapist, there is different in the clients that come to therapy for me, because most of the time when you are a male therapist in a trauma treatment center, you get all the boys who come to therapy, and I see that my female colleague, they get patient in all the ages. Like they have young girls, they have teenager, and my patient, most of them was under the age of 10. Like most of them was young children. And it was very, very rare that, very uncommon that I get like to treat in a teenager. And I ask myself, where are all these boys? We know that 1 of 5 boys going through sexual trauma, we talked about until the age of 16, and they doesn't go to therapy. We see in all the therapeutic center that the percentage of boys who come to therapy over the age of 12, it's between 10 to 15%. Like for one boy, there is like 8 girls who come to therapy
yes.
in those ages. And it bothers me because, as you said before, if we doesn't talk about it, if we doesn't do something with it, we will act it. The person who going through trauma, it doesn't end in the age of 12. He is feeling the trauma even harder in the adolescence time and phase. And we see that they are doing a lot of things from the trauma, like sometimes they hurt themselves, sometimes they hurt others, and it bothers me. And we talked about it in ELEM, and 3 years ago, my previous manager called me and he said to me, you remember that we talked about the problem of boys who doesn't have a place they doesn't come to therapy. So we in ELEM, we have basic motto. If someone in some population doesn't come to therapy, the therapy need to come to them. Like the one who need to change is not the patient, is
I like that attitude.
the organization. Like we need to go out to meet them. So we started Orshina. We get funding from Social Security, and we do this project. And we thought, how can we can break these barriers of all this masculinity? So we thought about program who combine two different methods, very different methods. Like we took the classical method of psychodynamic thinking about trauma, which is very basic. In treating trauma, you have to be able to think about the dynamic situation. And we took the thinking and we combine it with very non-conservative way of working with trauma, with informal treatment, which informal approach. When you work with teenager, a lot of time you using this approach, but informal approach is very different from psychodynamic therapy, because in psychodynamic therapy, the framework is very important. Like you have to have this setting. You meet the person once in a week. You do it in only with him, and you try to do it. There is a big difference between the therapist and the patient. It's very important. And the informal approach is trying to deconstruct the situation, like to do it more eye-to-eye relationship. Also to try to do a lot of spaces, the therapy, not only in room, you go outside also, and you do a lot of stuff that it's very non-conservative way of treating trauma. So we build this program, which is groups who combine classical therapy with informal work. They come once in a week to 4 hours meeting, which combine in the first stage, they come to 1 hour of clinical group therapy, which is we talked about the things, and it's more
You try to normalize the conversation, and you try, yeah.
And after it, we have like a break, and then we prepare together a dinner. We sit around the table and eat together, and then we play together. So this way, we were thinking that they feeling more comfortable. They don't have to. For boys, going to therapy, it's like going out of my comfort zone. Like you ask me, I already experienced big break of the faith. I can't trust anyone. So you ask me to come to trust
you, right?
trust other adults, to be with him in one room. It's exactly the way that the trauma happened. So
because of some kind of trust, and that trust was violated, and now you're asking the person to trust again. And
so when you bring him to a group of his peers, he feel more comfortable he's not alone. He has other boys with him. He feeling that he's more normal. He's not some freak.
Yes.
A lot of times they are thinking about themselves. And also in this age, he need to feel independent. And treatment is being depend on adult, and he want to feel he is an adult. He doesn't want to
Yes.
be. So the group therapy and the group playing and all this informal situation helps them feel much more comfortable in the situation. And we let them, some of them, if they want in the start only come to the informal group, they can come. So in those groups, we have very amazing mixture of people.
That sounds amazing. It really incredible. So I know when we spoke earlier, you were telling me a little bit more about taking the therapy to the people.
Yeah.
And I know that beyond the group, you started something in the center of Jerusalem,
Yeah.
and where you are really in the street, in a public square. Can you just tell us a little bit about, if I was to walk up and see it, what would the signs say? How would I know that you are there? What does it physically look like? Who is behind a table or whatever you have? What is it physically that I would see if I turned the corner and came
So
across
this is
you?
the most exciting thing that I'm doing right now. This is the thing that I love the most. So we open in the city center in Jerusalem, called Kikar Yafo Square, and Kikar Zion Square.
Yeah,
And
by the old Time cigarette money exchange. That's a
yeah,
famous square. Okay.
yeah. So we put on huge signs with 3 signs. One of them said, Orshina in the city, a place for a teenager to talk about sexuality and vulnerability. And we chose this word very particularly. We thought a lot about it because we want to let them feeling that they don't have to declare themselves as victim of trauma. So you can come to talk about sexuality, or you can come to talk about vulnerability, not in a sexual
Any kind of
connection.
vulnerability.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also there is a big sign, don't stay alone with it, talk with us and our details to contact us. And
So
also,
who stands at the table? I mean, I imagine you have put some hours standing at the table.
yeah,
Who else is at the table
in
there?
we're doing these things 2 years right now. And the first year it was only me, and it was me and 2 workers in the center, Oad and Inbar, and it was amazing. I can't imagine these things because when we started it, a lot of people told us, how are you doing such a things? How are you going out and talking about trauma? And we told them about something that we did before, which is called Oel HaEvel VaNechama, the tent of comfort and
It's mourning and comfort. Yes.
morning and comfort, and which we open space for people who experience trauma to talk about the experience after a big rabbi was reported that he offended people. So we see that 600 people come to this tent, and one of them told us very important thing, which I want to repeat about it. She said to us, the field of trauma is working in architecture of shame, which means that we are building our therapeutic center and our rape crisis center. אנחנו מדגישים, we are emphasized like
Yes.
the
Yes.
most important thing is the confidentiality, like the secrecy, and like be given person like is confident and is that he won't be exposed.
Right.
A lot of time the therapeutic center doesn't have like a big sign which said this is a therapeutic center for sexual trauma, and a lot of time there is no address, and a lot of time you can't find this space because they want to make you feel secure. And she said, you make, in the one hand, you make people feel secure that they can come to you, but in the other hand, you are increasing the feeling of shame. Like I have to hide the things that I'm doing.
Right.
And she
I have
said,
I have to make sure that nobody sees me walk
yeah,
into this
yeah.
building. Yes.
And she said the shame need to go to the other side. Like the one who offend, the one who attack, he is the one who need to feel the shame. And she said to us, when you open this tent, you're doing this change. Like you said, nobody has to feel ashamed about it. So we took this experience and we continue it in the street. And our basic message is you can talk about the trauma in the street. You don't have to be ashamed, and you can talk about it. And a lot of time we experience home and closed places as the safe spaces. But a lot of the people that we meet in the street, for them, home, house, closed places are the most frightening environments.
But what you were
And
saying before about it, you want me to sit in a room with one other person?
yeah,
That's how I was
yeah,
formed. So
yeah.
like
So
it's really
that,
shifting the dynamic in the
yeah,
street.
their experience is exactly the opposite of most of us. Like talking in the street, it's much more secure for me because I can go wherever I want. I can do whatever I want. I
I
don't
can
have
leave the conversation at any
yeah,
time.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And
absolutely.
most of them doesn't tell us their full name. They tell us only sometimes their real name. Sometimes they invent some names, some pseudonyms. So I want to tell you like a story which elaborates this situation, which
Wonderful.
big example for the situation. So a lot of time the signs are indicator to see people who are trying to come to us, but they are feeling afraid. They're feeling not comfortable. And I have to say one thing, that one rule that we are very strict about, that if anyone come to our space, one of us come to him and explain him what he is going into. Because the most important thing is to return the feeling of control, that he can control the situation. So we let him know who is us and where are you going to. So we can choose if he wants to get inside or not. So I noticed an older like a person, ultra-Orthodox person who looked into the sign. He was with a gray beard and hair, and he looked very troubled. So I go to him and I ask him, do you want me to explain to you about our space? And he said to me, you know, I am very angry about you. I'm extremely angry about you. And I said to him, why? Why was you so angry? And he said to me, because how you have the rude to open this space in the city center of the holy city in Jerusalem. I see that you are a religious person. You have the yarmulke, you have the beard. So how you doesn't care about our value, like tzniut or modesty, and about lashon hara, don't talk bad about other. You have children, you raise them to these values. And I told them, okay, I understand what you're saying, and I wanted to say to you, yeah, I'm a religious person, and it's very important to me to be modest. It's very important to me that we not talk about everything everywhere, and that we don't say for nothing bad thing about people. But you know, I'm working in the field of sexual trauma for 12 years, and I learned one thing that I have to change in the society, which is we have things that we don't talk about, but we have things that we have to talk about. And if we don't talk about them, it's ruin our life. It's pikuach nefesh. It's dangerous.
It's an act that you do to save a life, even if it
Yeah,
goes against
yeah.
other things.
And I told him, this is what I tell to my children. If someone like this, you experience someone like this, and I explain them, you have to talk with someone. You can come to me, you can come to your mother, or you can come to other adults that you are trust, and only if they talk, they can be free from it. And he was listening very carefully, and then he was okay and went away. And after I don't know, like an half an hour, he come back and he said to me, you know, I can't stop thinking about the things that you told me. I
Wow.
can't stop thinking about pikuach nefesh that you said. And he said to me, you know why I can't stop thinking about it? Because it's happened to me. When 40 years ago, when I was in the yeshiva, someone did these things to me. He said that things to me. He
Wow.
doesn't say the exact word. And then he said to me, and you know, it's cost me a lot. It's ruined my life. And I swear to myself when it's happened that I will never talk about it with anyone. And right now, it's the first time that I ever talked about it. And he said to me, you know that I lost my daughter because of it. And I asked him, what do you mean you lost your daughter? And he said to me, I have a lot of children, and my eldest daughter, I was raising her in a very strict way. I didn't let her to go wherever she liked because I was afraid that she experienced the things that I have experienced. And he said to me, I watch her like a pearl. I didn't let her go. And when she was 16, she left the house. She left the religious. She cut the relationship with me. And
Wow.
she never talked to me. And he said to me, if only I can explain her why I acted like this. But I can't talk with her about it. I can't let her know because I swear doesn't talk about it with anyone. And then I told him, you know, you can still talk with her. You can still call her or try through her mother to reach her and to explain her. And I'm sure that
Incredible.
do it, she will a little bit understand why you act like this. And then he said to me, and I want to tell you one thing more. Now I know why I was so angry about you. I was angry about you because you are here. And I also was very angry about you because you wasn't here 40 years ago when I
Oh,
needed you.
wow. Wow.
This is what
Well, Ori, let me
one
just
time.
say,
Yeah.
it's so clear to me that you're doing incredible holy work. And the reason I know it's incredible holy work is because the 40 years is not an accident. The 40 years is like that number has meaning within our tradition. The 40 years is tells us about it is some kind of nisayon, some kind of test, some kind of challenge, some type of
Voyage.
voyage. Totally. So thank you for all the incredible healing work that you're doing. I know we want to end on a positive note, and you wanted to share an artistic representation of one of the people that you've worked with. And I definitely feel like it's good to end on a positive note and just to send out the message that because of your work and the many other people that are in this space who are making space to listen, making space to talk, making space to heal, we are, I hope, moving forward. And I know the work is happening in many different places in the world, but within the Jewish community and in Israel, you are really a pioneer. So thank you for that. And we're going to pass it back so we can hear some questions if we have any questions, and bring back our other friends into the conversation. But Ori, thank you so much for being part of this conversation and doing the work that you do. Tracey?
Thank you. I am so pleased to be not only be part of this, but to hear all the wonderful things, Ori, that you are doing. And thank you, Rabbi Brenner, for helping move this and helping Ori talk about his wonderful journey. I am blessed to be hearing this today. So thank you, Ori. I'm not sure if do we have any questions? I don't know if we have any questions.
We do just now have in the chat the artistic project that
Ah,
I saw before, which is amazing. Do you want to just say a word about Ori, about this project and why you found it so compelling?
About the artwork.
Yes, about
Yes.
Yeah.
this.
So first of all, I want to explain the context. So we have this special group of this young men who participate once in a week, as I told before, and it's very unique group, which in very unique mixture of people. Like we have in the same group ultra-Orthodox men and also national Zionist religious people, and also we have trans secular boy with a man with trans, and they sit all together in a group, and they sometimes fight a lot about a lot of about about a lot of things, but it's amazing to see that trauma is the thing that divide us. Like the experience of trauma is experience of being alone. Nobody knows me. Nobody really knows me. Nobody really understands me. Even my closest friend, my closest partner, my closest parents doesn't know who I really am. And you're feeling isolated. And then I think the big tikkun olam, which our center is doing, is unite us with coping with the trauma. So the things that divide us, we take it and it's bind us all together in changing the world. I a lot of time told this young men, you are like pioneers who walking on the moon. You walking on new land. Nobody did what we did right now. Nobody doing it. It's very unique. So one of them, a lot of them come from religious societies and families and communities, and the religious thing is very present in our conversation. And one of them is this is doing a lot of arts in a lot of ways, and he doing this project with called the invalid talit, like the talita psula, and he took it's called tzitzit, which is the holy garment we put under our clothes, and it's something that we put on us for protection, like the phrase said, it will guard you. It will guard you, and you when you put it on you, and especially in it's also talked the mitzvah talked about the sexuality, like it's
It
guard
said,
you.
yes, just so I can explain it physically to
Yeah,
people, that when you wear the strings, the fringes, that if you jump up on a bed, the fringe will come and hit you in the face and will remind you to not be
like
led by your sexual impulse.
so it's supposed to be someone that guard us from our sexuality and from other sexuality, because if they see that it's it, they will not harm you. And he took this garment and he drew a lot of artistic work about it, on it. He took his picture when he was a little boy, when he experienced the trauma, the sexual trauma, and he drew this amazing portrait of himself in a blue color, blue tone. And he said that the talit, there is a phrase which said talit shekulat chelet, and all till talit, which said like you're perfect. And he said, how can I be perfect if it's happened to me? Like, can I ever be perfect again? Can I ever, am I totally damaged? And he write a lot of phrases which a lot of people tell to him as he share his trauma, like you wanted it, you invited it, and he drew like this snake with the baby, like a lot of things that are talking about the trauma through this clothes. And also we talked about this fragments, which is very tangled. You have to tie them in a very particular way. And he said, I'm tangled in this complication of sexuality and the religious feeling, and being a very little boy who experienced it, and it's a lot of symbolic way to express his complicated feeling about trauma.
Incredible. So, Tracey, thank you for welcoming us to this conversation and for all the work you do with the American Friends of ELEM. And just want to pass it to you for the last word.
I want to thank both of you, both the work you do here in the United States, Rabbi Brenner, and Ori, all the work you do at the Orshina Center. I think there's more discussion to have on how our efforts here in the United States in some ways complement some of the work that you're doing, Ori, in Israel, especially with not just boys, but with girls as well, and with all adolescents and young adults, and what we can do in the future to continue not only talking about it, but finding these really innovative ways to help our survivors where they are and for us to do the changing for them. So thank you very much. And if you go onto the ELEM site, and I think it's in the chat, right? So elem.org, oh, like my eyesight, /survivors-hope. You can see the art, I believe we can see the artwork that Ori is talking about, so that it gives you an idea of what he's representing. And if you know more about the campaign or you want to make a donation, please, again, go into elem.org under donations, and we would love to hear from you. Thanks again.